华尔街现场节目中为大家带来，让大家看一看刘建超先生对于中美关系未来所表达的相关的观点。接下来为大家说到的是这周末我们讨论最热议的一个话题。美国的情报居然获得了中国军队腐败高层的细节，而且这样的一个腐败状况在美国情报界看来可能会制止习近平迅速发动战争的计划。这个细节具体到什么情况呢？小杨，你有没有关注到这一篇报道？其中哪一个细节让你觉得最为惊讶啊？
具体来说，其实应该是2个细节。第一个细节就是在我们今天直播的时候已经跟大家有说了，彭博社的这篇文章主旨就是说这个中国解放军中的军中腐败现象太严重了，严重到让习近平没有能力去打一场胜仗。那么其中的细节，除了这个弹道导弹 ICBM 的燃料从燃料被换成了水之外，还有一个细节，其实也是很重要的，就是这个在中国西北部那些导弹发射井的这个盖子没有办法正常打开，没有办法正常运作。这个是彭博社这篇文章中提到的2大细节。我尤其关注到的是这个文章一出几乎是炸锅性的一个反馈呢，不只是这个时政观察家呢，包括一些军事的爱好者以及专业的军事评论员都关注到了这篇文章。那尤其我看到的是一个美国的一个弹道导弹的专家，他是来自华盛顿美国科学家联合会的核信息项目主任，叫做汉斯·克里斯滕森他也是评价了一下这样的一个文章。所以说彭博社在上个周末搞出了一个爆款，但是这篇文章中的很多细节让你觉得犹如天方夜谭一般。
也的确是我们的很多观众朋友们其中不少是资深的军迷，也对这篇文章中的一些细节提出了一些质疑。比如说现在大部分的弹道导弹都是固体燃料的你这个水是怎么来的？但是也有专家说这个呢，到底是弹道导弹还是巡航导弹，其实在文章中没有特别清晰的说出。而很多的苏式武器，比如东风系列现在仍在使用液体燃料，尽管军事专业人士认为使用液体燃料对于导弹的存储的安全系数要求更高，现在呢普遍也不是现代军事中常用的做法。而同时大家更为质疑的是中情局的推论，认为发现腐败问题就会阻止习近平的战争计划，这个判断也是引起了非常多的争议。但是我们说军事话题毕竟是一个专业话题，怎么办呢？我们先给大家科普一下导弹到底是怎么回事，导弹到底是怎么发射的。这里我们特别找到了美国太空司令部的一段纪录片，帮我们解释导弹运行的各种细节。我们请导播放出这一段资料片
Rocket motors operate on the same principle as do jet engines. Both are rated in terms of thrust rather than horsepower. Both achieve that thrust from the expulsion of exhaust gases from burning fuel. However, that thrust is not the result of those exhaust gases pushing against the air mass of the atmosphere. This is a very common misconception. You have all seen pictures of rocket launchings. And when the rocket seemed to stand on end for some time, you believed it was being held there by the force of the exhaust blasting against the ground. This is not so. Rocket motors operate on the principle of Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The result would be exactly the same if the rocket were in a perfect vacuum. In fact, one of the reasons rockets are being developed is because they will operate in a vacuum. And since they carry their own oxygen, be able to enter the rarefied atmosphere of outer space and gain freedom from aerodynamic drag. Now let's see how Newton's law applies. First, we'll change this schematic diagram of a rocket to a simple enclosed cylinder and ignite a propellant charge inside it. As the pressures from the burning fuel build up, they are equal in every direction. Being equal, they can't cause motion in any direction because they cancel each other out. However, when we open one end, the action of the gases exhausting at that end sets up a reaction at the other end which acts. But notice, it is not the exhaust stream pushing against anything which causes the thrust. It is the reaction at the other end. The main components of all rocket motors are a combustion chamber and a nozzle. The combustion chamber provides space in which the propellant is burned to produce gases at high pressures. The nozzle, usually of the de Laval type, is attached to the exit end of the combustion chamber. This nozzle is of the converging-diverging type, in which exhaust gases are accelerated, so that in the smallest cross-sectional area, or throat, they attain the local speed of sound. In the diverging section, these gases are further accelerated to supersonic velocities. Close observation of this should give a better understanding of why the rocket does not get its thrust from any impact effect of those exhaust gases. First, let's state clearly that the exhaust gases do push against the air mass. What is important is that this doesn't have any effect on the rocket. Here's why. The impact of the exhaust gases sets up disturbances in the air. Disturbances in gases are sound waves, and therefore must travel at the same speed as sound. Now, if the velocity of the exhaust gases were to remain below the speed of sound, then the disturbances they create could be transmitted back along the gas column to the rocket. But when the exhaust gases reach supersonic speeds, any forces traveling in the opposite direction would have to travel faster than the speed of the exhausting gases in order to have any effect on the rocket. Now, watch this carefully. As pressures build up in all directions, they not only push against the nose wall, but also force gases back out of the nozzle. Thrust is produced by the difference between pressures at the nozzle exit and pressures at the forward end of the combustion chamber. The de Laval type nozzle is designed to make exhaust gases reach supersonic velocities. A further effect of this design is that as velocity of the exhausting gases increases, pressure decreases. The faster those gases are exhausted, the lower the pressures become. In actual operation, the exhaust gas velocities are so great that by the time the gases have reached the outer end of the nozzle, pressure has been reduced to equal that of outside or ambient pressure. The tremendous difference between this pressure and the original high pressure, which still exists at the forward end, is what gives the rocket its thrust and makes it possible for the rocket motor to operate in a vacuum, where, since the ambient pressure would be zero, the difference between nose and nozzle exit pressures would be equal to the absolute combustion chamber pressure. Now, there are many other factors which also affect thrust. It doesn't make any difference in what order they're listed, because they are so interrelated that it's almost impossible to speak of one without mentioning the other. Let's start with combustion chamber volume. Any change in the volume will increase or decrease the combustion chamber pressure. An increase of combustion chamber pressure will increase the temperature of gases, the temperature of the propellant, and increase the propellant burning rate. All of these will, of course, have an effect on the mass rate of flow of gases. A decrease in the nozzle throat area will have the effect of backing up the exhaust gases and thus increasing combustion chamber pressure, causing increased temperature of gases, higher temperature of propellant, faster propellant burning rate, and change in mass rate of flow. No one of them can be varied without affecting the others. So far, we've spoken only of results caused by variations in the physical design of the motor. However, variations in the other factors would cause similar effects. For instance, inhibiting or decreasing the propellant burning rate would decrease combustion chamber pressure, temperature of exhaust gases, the temperature of the propellant, and reduce the mass rate of flow of the exhaust gases. Variations in the fuel to oxidizer ratio could have a similar effect. An increase in the temperature of the propellant, either before igniting or during combustion, will have a definite effect on the temperature of gases, on combustion chamber pressure, propellant burning rate, and mass rate of flow. Ambient pressure has no direct effect upon any of the other factors in this list, but indirectly it affects them all, because a rocket motor must be designed to conform to the ambient pressure of the altitude in which it is going to operate. And efficient rocket motor design must bring all of these factors into correct mathematical balance. This is true whether the motor be of solid or liquid propellant type. Let's consider a solid motor first. Like all rocket motors, it has a combustion chamber and a de Laval type nozzle. The combustion chamber contains a solid propellant charge. The propellant is molded in various shapes depending on the purpose and the dimensions of the combustion chamber, and will vary in size and shape with each different design. To this is added an igniter, which can be located in various positions in the chamber. This is usually a pyrotechnic device consisting of an electric squib, which acts as a primer to set off a larger charge of powder, which in turn ignites the propellant charge. From this point on, the action is just as we've already explained. The high-pressure gases created by the burning propellant, accelerated by the nozzle, act to give the motor thrust. All rocket motors carry both oxidizer and fuel. Both are mixed together in solid propellant grains in such a way that they will remain inert until they're ignited. Fuels most commonly used are asphalt and oil, rubber, or rosin. Oxidizers are usually potassium perchlorate, ammonium perchlorate, sodium, or potassium nitrate. There are some compounds which furnish both fuel and oxidizer, such as nitroglycerin, nitrocellulose, or ammonium picrate. Propellants of this type must be mixed with inhibiting materials so that they will burn rather than detonate. The regular fuel and oxidizer mixtures are frequently restricted too, but only after they've been mixed and molded according to the design purpose of the rockets for which they're intended, when certain surfaces are coated to control burning. These are called restricted burning charges. There are many more shapes, but these three are good examples. They are the star-chambered, the cruciform, and the solid cylindrical. The star-chambered grain has a star-shaped passage running through the length of the charge. It is restricted on the outer surface where it comes in contact with the chamber walls. This design was developed to provide a constant burning area and reduce combustion chamber wall temperature. The cruciform is restricted on two opposite sides of the crossform and each end, leaving a large burning area which will remain constant throughout the burning period. The solid cylindrical grain is ignited at the nozzle end and is usually coated so as to restrict burning on all surfaces except the nozzle end, and thus has earned the name cigarette burning. Multiple grain and the hollow cylindrical are almost invariably unrestricted and burn on all surfaces simultaneously. Even though most solid propellants will store for short periods, under extreme climatic conditions, such temperature variations will have a definite effect on their amount of thrust and the length of time they will burn. Propellants which are heated before igniting will burn rapidly, giving greater thrust, but shortening the total burning time. Coal propellants, on the other hand, will burn more slowly, giving less thrust, but will burn appreciably longer. Neither of these conditions are liable to create any hazard as long as temperatures are within design limits. However, there is one exception. Propellant grains become brittle in extreme cold and can be fractured if handled carelessly. The danger is that since the propellants are inside the combustion chamber, such a fracture would not be discovered. If this were to happen, when combustion reached the fracture, too large a burning area would be presented, suddenly increasing pressures beyond design limits, and the rocket would blow out. Here is a liquid propellant motor of the bipropellant type being made ready for firing on a test stand. The lack of clean lines in this rocket is because you are looking at the power plant itself, which in liquid motors is built so that it may be installed in any type vehicle. Although basically the same as a solid motor, the liquid motor has more parts, which are necessary to handle the two propellants. Again, a fuel and an oxidizer, both liquids, that ignite upon contact. The nozzle is identical with the one used in solid motors. The combustion chamber may be smaller, since it doesn't have to store propellant. The injector sprays the two propellants into the combustion chamber. Fuel and oxidizer must be kept apart until they meet in the combustion chamber, so there are two propellant tanks. These are connected to the combustion chamber by a feed system, part of which also acts as a cooling system by carrying one of the propellants around the nozzle and combustion chamber walls. This not only serves to cool the combustion chamber and nozzle, but also heats the propellant to a more efficient temperature for combustion. On this system, two pumps force the propellants through the feed lines, and valves control the propellant flow, making it possible to start and stop the liquid motor at will. Another system utilizes high-pressure gas instead of pumps. There are many variations of these designs using bipropellants, separate fuels, and oxidizers. The ideal motor would be one that used monopropellants, single compounds containing all components necessary for combustion. It would be much simpler, requiring only one tank, one pump, one valve, and one feed line. The drawback is fuel. Although extensive research is underway, so far we have none that is completely satisfactory. So until we do, we'll continue to work with two tanks, two pumps, two valves, and two feed lines. The propellants used in these motors are called bipropellants because they consist of two separate liquids. One a fuel, the other an oxidizer, neither of which will burn without the other. Some typical fuels are alcohol, standard petroleum airplane fuels, and aniline. Most commonly used oxidizers are liquid oxygen and nitric acid. Aniline is used only with nitric acid, and this teaming gives excellent performance. Occasionally, nitric acid is used with petroleum and is preferred for some systems. Liquid oxygen may be used with either alcohol or petroleum. Because of its low temperature, less than minus 297 degrees Fahrenheit, liquid oxygen must be stored in thermos containers. But it is a very powerful oxidizer which causes any combustible material to burn rapidly. Used with either alcohol or petroleum, it makes one of the best propellant teams now in use. The extreme low temperature of liquid oxygen makes it very dangerous to handle. It will burn the skin in 10 seconds, and longer contact will freeze the flesh, so it must never be handled unless protective clothing is worn. This is also true of red fuming nitric acid, most often used to oxidize aniline. This acid will not only destroy the flesh, causing burns that are extremely difficult to heal, but its fumes are extremely dangerous, and if breathed, can cause death. Aniline, while an excellent fuel when used with nitric acid, is highly poisonous. It may be absorbed into the bloodstream through the skin, where it will destroy the red corpuscles and cause anemia. Acute cases of aniline poisoning can cause death. Aside from personal precautions, none of these liquids should be handled carelessly. In loading, only one of any two propellants is handled at one time, never both simultaneously. And care must be taken to dispose of any spillage before the next half of the bipropellant team is brought to the rocket motor, so that spillage from the second propellant will not cause combustion during the fueling operation. This is especially true of aniline, which has a very low vapor pressure and will therefore contaminate an area for a long period. Alcohol and petroleum are ideal fuels because they are readily available, non-poisonous, they store well, and are comparatively easy to handle. It must always be kept in mind that rocket propellants are capable of unleashing more raw energy than any other known fuels. The devastation which could result from the least carelessness or lack of familiarity with precautionary measures makes it mandatory that no person handle propellants until he's been thoroughly schooled in proper methods.
好，我们请导播把这一段视频结束。好，那么刚才在这段视频中呢，我们是熟悉了火箭的构造，也熟悉了固体燃料和液体燃料推进两种不同的火箭。同时啊，这一篇纪录片还就发射火箭中的一些安全须知，给我们观众朋友们进行了提醒。那么这一段视频呢，是来自美国太空司令部的一段科普节目。今天我们特别在节目中截取其中的片段，向大家分享。了解了火箭发射的基本原理，何明先生，我们是不是点评一下这一篇文章的内容，到底是不是具有可信度啊？
刚才的这个纪录片呢非常好啊，虽然很陈旧，看起来有一点像抗日战争烧的那个纪录片，当然确实解决了这个提供了基本上的导弹发射的基本的这个原理。那么昨天彭博通讯社这篇报道出来以后呢，我开始没怎么注意啊，但是看到大家议论太多，哇，9年搞什么导弹装水啊，这个脑袋彻底的进水了。那么后来到了晚上的时候，我再看了一下这个报道，从这篇报道来看呢，不客气的讲啊，不客气的讲，这个报道如果是作为烟幕弹啊，作为一个心理的一个打击啊，或者是作为政治宣传的一部分，那是可以理解，因为很多人呢，出于对这个导弹发射的不了解啊，以为中共啊的导弹已经发射到了一种进水的地步了啊，这个确实是非常的形象，很容易传播啊。那么如果达到这个目的呢，我认为已经达到了。啊，加上中共自己的保密性也好，中共的习惯也好，哑巴吃黄连啊，他也没办法去辩解，但是呢，这个情报有多大的可信度呢？我可以说是零啊，我甚至可以说是负数。为什么呢？因为导弹的发射呀，只有在这个或者说我们简单说吧。到中国的这个导弹的发射已经也非常丰富了，固定的发射、移动的发射、空中的发射、海基的发射很多，但是固定的发射点啊，往往是在人烟稀少的地方。我们看这个纪录片就很清楚，因为它这个液体啊造成的污染或者危险性程度是非常高的。而且往往因液体发射的是用于的战略导弹，用于这个洲际导弹，因为它推升的距离非常远，所以它的这个燃料固体燃料是达不到的，所以呢，它的整个的取上的这个灌输的过程呢比较长达几个小时之多，而且呢需要的这个配合程度很高。汽车也好，人员移动也好，卫星基本上就可以监视到了这个洲际导弹的这个移动的情况所以一般来讲呢，像这个中国这种可以打到地球任何一个洲的这种所谓的洲际导弹，基本上采集的是燃料。那么会不会用水呢？这种情况是几乎不存在的只有2种情况存在，就是说它骗你的它根本就是一个虚假的发射场地让你感觉到好像它在这装颜料，实际上根本不是装的颜料，它装的水。第二个情况呢，用水来测试物理属性这样的话呢，可以，因为它需要很多测试重量推升力这个距离等等那么平时用水来装这个事情几乎就不存在所以这篇报道它没有讲清楚在什么情况之下装水，而且用伪装和腐败也用不着用水来装，它可以用劣质来装，因为水是不能发射的水只会造成爆炸所以这种常识我不认为会在导弹部队里面会出现那么这个中国现在确实呢也在研究，就是更具有强有力的混合发射体，也就是说呢，用燃料和固体来进行结合，但是这个方面的突破我们并不知道苏联俄罗斯是出现过这种用这个核动力 然后再用这个固体的发射，因为固体发射的距离比较短，但是它的好处是什么呢？就是及时可以发射，对吧？你立即进行反应，所以往往呢是用于在某一些场地，比如说在首都比如说在这个紧急需要应急的一些军事基地。真正应用比较战略性的是在西北地区。西北地区那为什么会成为核武器发射实验基地为什么9前呢？为什么这个一些核武器不在新疆就在西北？因为它人员稀少。它出现的问题还可以相对来讲，如果是在这个上海或者是在广州或者是在北京是不可想象的那么所以这是第一个，我认为这个装水的之后说法基本上是不符合事实，也不可能存在。这是一个基本上应该是ABC 以下的问题，ABC 以下的问题第二个是那结论就错得更离谱，就是说这个会打击习近平的军事信心。恰恰相反，进行军队的这个整治是习近平形象的表现。任何一个军事统帅无论他是个独裁者还是个民主选举产生的领袖，他一般来讲动军队是不太敢动的，因为军队是一个国家的荣耀，军队又是国家的最敏感的这么一个体系所以呢，往往是由职业军人或者是有长期经过军事院校、有荣耀感、有派系、有战争经历的人形成一个军队体系。那么中国的这个军事在很大的程度上，它是有重大的这个派系四野就是一个最明显的象征。后来四野慢慢消失之后，也有了所谓的兵种，也有所谓的将军也有所谓的中央某些人形成某一些人事派系。但是到了习近平上台之后，他把这个东西全部打掉先打掉军队的荣誉感，把这个军队原来的历史记录给它抹掉根本就是你原来是多少中，我根本不让你存在了，我换一个名字另外就是把你所有的派系全部拉掉所谓当年江泽民贾平安他们还有这个邓小平的秘书叫王什么林那么所形成的这种长期的军事体系把它打掉什么沈阳军区也好，兰州军区也好，广州军区也好，南京军区也好北京军区也好中央军委也好都进行了各种各样的调整。习近平上台之后，他步骤最大的就是个军队，他基本上把上将中将这一批给落了一片，但是没有办法，因为少将还是戈贝幸时代还是江泽民时候培养起来的，他不可能在一个班长一下子上将军，所以现在拉掉的这些所谓的将军呢，还是胡锦涛时候尤其是江泽民时候留下的腐败的官员的一个遗留产品。他通过这样一种铲除，会建立自己的全新的军队的这个体系，从而对这个结构进行调整。我们之前多次讲过，解放军的腐败已经到了一种什么程度，你无法想象的程度。但是再无法的想象的程度，也不会出现注水这种情况，更不会出了说习近平我就不变了，因为你变了以后是非常危险的。但是习近平已经过了这个危险期，他把中央军委的主席、副主席，对吧？这个常务副主席、副主席总参谋长这个总政治部主任这个已经落了一片了现在就是把这个残余势力进一步清洗，来建立他的这个习家军的这么一个军事体系，而且对他的军事行星只有帮助，没有负面作用。所以我就觉得彭博同学在这篇报道吧他要么呢就是情报系统他们做的工作是泄露情报进行心理战泄露情报让你知道我掌握你的情报，泄露情报有时候就骗老百姓的。我觉得这篇报道在专业人士看起来应该是不合格的。
好，那么我们也期待更多的军事方面的领域专家对于这一篇文章中的各种细节进行推断或者是质疑。那么今天呢，何斌先生也与我们分享了他对于这一篇文章的判断的分析，希望呢对于我们观众朋友们有